To je zadeva, ki kliče k nujnosti novega sodnega reda. Častno razsodišče, ki ga imamo uradno v našem statutu. Smo ga imeli, imamo člane, ampak ni bil funkcionalen. Zakaj? Zato, ker nismo imeli sodnega reda. Tudi če v ustavi piše, da je sodišče, pa potem sodišče nima svojih zakonov, svoje organizacije, ker ustava to dovoljuje, nam statut to dovoljuje, zdaj smo pa ta okostnjak naredili. Mi imamo zdaj uradno Evropsko sodišče, prvo neodvisno sodišče v Evropi, ki ni povezano z državo, ampak smo ga sami naredili. V skladu s statutom, v skladu z ustavo. In nobeno drugo sodišče v Republiki Sloveniji se v naše odločitve ne more vmešavati. In samo upravni odbor razlaga zakone oziroma pravilnike. Sodniki, ki jih imamo, delajo neodvisno, glede na zakon in glede na neodvisni strokovni svet za digitalno etiko. In ker so naši podatki tako ogroženi, smo se odločili, da se bomo zavarovali. Spoštovani člani, spoštovane članice, vsi, ki zdaj poslušate, tukaj je vsebina, vidite logo, pravičen svet društva Belis, častno razsodišče. Simbol častnega razsodišča, Belis ponazarja temeljna načela pravičnosti, uravnoteženosti ter zavezanosti morali, etiki in spoštovanju ustave, zakonov in danih zavez. Elementi logotipa in njihova simbolika, krog, simetrična oblika, zvezda, uravnotežene črte predstavljajo sledeče. Krog kot simbol celovitosti in enakopravnosti ponazarja nepristranskost pri odločanju ter povezanosti članov društva v skupnem prizadevanju za pravičnost. Simetrična oblika izraža ravnovesje in objektivnost. Zvezda, ki je pa samo ena, na eni strani so 3 pikce, na eni strani je zvezda, ki je pa zvezda Severnica, in samo po tej zvezdi Severnici se uravnavamo. Ne uravnavamo se po 5 zvezdah, ne po celem krogu zvezd, kot je v Evropski uniji, ne po 3 zvezdah, tako kot je v slovenski zastavi. Uravnavamo se samo po zvezdi, ki je edini kažipot. Kot simbol, kot vodilo, kot vrednota označuje smernice moralnega ravnanja, visoke standarde, ki jih častno razsodišče postavlja v društvo Belis kot zgled. In pa črte, ki jih vidite, so uravnotežene, geometrijska natančnost, poudarjajo pa disciplino, red, doslednost, pravno stabilnost v okviru zakonitosti in etičnih norm. Torej, častno razsodišče. In če preberem 1. člen ustave. V demokratični Republiki Slovenije, ne bom rekel Republika Slovenija, ampak v demokratični Republiki Sloveniji, kar je pravilno in ustavno, je organ znotraj društva za srečno življenje Belis. Logo častnega razsodišča zato upravičeno odraža skrb društva Belis za pravno in moralno urejenost skupnosti, dolžnost za spoštovanje pravil in odgovornost za pravično odločanje. Tukaj vidite 6 točk, splošne določbe je sestavljen sodni red, zakon o sodnem redu, sestava častnega sodišča, postopki pred častnim sodiščem, pravice vpletenih, odločbe častnega sodišča in pa varstvo podatkov pri sodelovanju. Če sam da zletimo skozi, to se pravi častno sodišče, ima najprej splošne odločbe, to se pravi pregled pravnega okvirja, cilji sodišča in pomen postopkov. Vse to sem vam postavil po mailu, kliknete, imate prezentacijo doma in si jo prenesete v svoj računalnik. In potem imamo tukaj, gledajte, opredelitev pojmov, kaj je kršitev, opredelitev postopka in ključni pogoj članstva. Če si član, je situacija taka, član Belisa, če nisi član, je situacija takšna. Delamo za vse države in smo društvo v javnem interesu. In nobeno ministrstvo in nobena država nam ne bo rekla, da mi nismo društvo v javnem interesu. Torej, če nas ne plačuje, to še ne pomeni, da mi nismo, toliko bolj smo v javnem interesu, vsa plačana društva so pa v pristranskem interesu, zato ker delajo za denar. Okay? In svet je čisto narobe obrnen. Ne? In tukaj, poglejte, zdaj gledamo naprej, imamo zakonitost, nepristranskost, preglednost, učinkovitost. Častno razsodišče sestava. Lahko imamo seveda, če bo gužva več, lahko izvolimo več sodnikov, več enota. Ne? Lahko imamo 3 enote po 5 sodnikov, lahko pa 1 enoto po 5 sodnikov. Vprašanje, kaj bo čas prinesel. Ampak verjemite mi, tukaj, kar vam danes govorim, se zapomnite, kaj bo čez 5 let, ali pa mogoče, ko mene več ne bo, ko to stoji, tako kot smo naredili naše društvo 2002 in smo ga odprli kdaj? Čez 18 let. Ne? A veste, to stoji. Mi smo naredili takrat društvo, ki ima svojo moč. Danes ga ne bi mogli več takšnega narediti, takrat smo ga lahko. In glejte, gre za strukturo članstva in pa vloge v sodišču. To se boste tudi sami pogledali. Način izvolitve. Naše sodnike smo izvolili, proces je v statutu določen, v statutu, ker tako mora biti. Je pa tle še bolj natančno določen potem ta odnos med samimi akterji. In pa vloga generalne skupščine. Kdo je generalna skupščina? Vi. Vi, ki še vedno vztrajate, ki ste z nami, ki nas poslušate. Vi ste tisti, zaradi katerih, če bo to nastalo, bo nastalo. In hvala vam. In vsi, ki ste tukaj, in vsi, ki seveda ste podporniki društva Belis in ki razumete, kaj delamo, zato ker marsikdo sploh ne razume. Če kaj se pa ti grejo. Zato, ker je njim lažje sedeti v kamotu, kavo piti pa dobiti 5 jurjev na račun, pa reče, kaj se pa oni grejo. Zakaj? Ko se mi neki gremo, se to njemu na računu pozna. Zato, ker mi rečemo, zdaj pa tega jaz ne bom več plačeval, pa zate delal, da ti kavo pil tam v uradu, pa meni po glavi, oprostite, nekaj pošiljava. Ne? Dovolj je bilo. Vloga generalne skupščine, to ste vi, imate pa ključno vlogo pri izvolitvi članov, sodnikov in takšne, kot si boste izvolili, takšne, kot boste predlagali, takšno bo sodišče. Isto kot v državi. Če bo dobro, bolj so pa trajanje mandati. Mandati so tudi vseeno odpovedani, si pogledajte sami. Pogoji za ponovno imenovanje, možnost je, da se to nadaljuje, da gre kontinuirano, a ne? In kakšni so postopki? Glejte, postopki pred sodiščem imamo začetek postopka, predložitev predloga in pa predložitev notranje organizacije društva. Gre za 2 vrsti postopka. Eno je recimo, ko se nekomu nekaj zgodi, pa je slišal, aha, tam je en Belis, dajmo mi njega vprašati, ker smo zaznali kršitev in ljudje seveda ne, se pogovarjajo in pride od zunaj. To se pravi, gre začetek predložitev predloga. Tak človek lahko piše v upravni odbor, lahko piše vodstvo društva, lahko piše v SND, pač organu, imamo javne naslove. In potem ta organ seveda najprej pošle na NSD, NSD je komisija, ki proučuje to in napiše odločbo. Če se državni organ, ki krši tako stvar, ker glavni državni organi kršijo, pritoži na odločbo SND, o tem odloča častno razsodišče. In to, kar častno razsodišče reče, se pa država lahko pritoži samo še v Bruselj oziroma na ESČP. Konc zgodbe. Nobeno vrhovno, nobeno ustavno, nobeno višje, nobeno lokalno, noben župan, nihče ne more več o tem odločati. Odločitev častnega razsodišča v drugi samoupravi je pravnomočna in dokončna. Samo ESČP lahko odloča, potem pa naj se država pritožuje dol. Mi bomo pa napisali, tako kot so oni nam 30 let kazni pisali, bomo pa tudi mi lepo predložili, tako ste kršili, toliko je kazen. Veste, kazni, ki jih imamo mi tukaj notri napisane v zakonu o varstvu osebnih podatkov, so 10, 20, 30 milijonov, pa to se nismo mi izmislili. To so uradne kazni pripisane iz GDPR in iz ZVOP2. S tem, da ZVOP2 daje 10-krat, 30-krat manjše kazni. Zato so kazni tako majhne, dobički pa tako veliki v Sloveniji, da se jim splača golfat, po nas tolčiti, ker če bo kazen sem, kjer ne bo nobenemu poznali pri takem denarju. Niso kazni, kakor za Facebook milijarda pa pol. Tam 5 milijončkov, 10 milijončkov, to pa tlele našim se nikjer nič ne pozna. A zdaj, ko smo mi tale vmesen člen našli, zdaj pa bomo malo to drugače naredili. Pa ne, da bi grozil. Zakon je tak, če za mene velja, velja zate, ki si ga pisal. Se si ti napisal zakon, se ga nismo mi. Mi smo ga samo prebrali in zdaj ga bomo objavili in povedali, kaj delate. To je vsa stvar, to je vsa umetnost. In častno razsodišče, evo, zahtevane informacije, ustrezna predloga, notri imate v zadnjem listu na zadnji strani formular, kaj se zahteva, kako mora izgledati predloga, in ker je to 5 ljudi, ki pride skupaj, če bo hotel kdo pritožbo, da se obravnava, bo pač dal 100 evrov, 20 evrov na sodnika za potne stroške, zato da si bodo ljudje cajt vzeli, pa to naredili, pa da bojo kaj pojedli, pa da bojo to naredili, da bojo tebi zadevo rešili. Kar ni nič, ker pa če tega ne bilo, kaj pa to pomeni? To pomeni, da bi se pa usul nekih pritožb, ker tako kot smo mi delali, pa je to bilo zdaj, ne vem, 8000 članov, ne, ki so bi vsi zastonj nekaj imeli, 50 članov je pa članarino plačevali, ne, za onih 8000, pa smo potem to pošiljali po celi Sloveniji. Tako da za take društvene pijavke, hvala lepa, konc zgodbe. In smo tle naredili pošten filter, pa si preberite noter. Ne? Naslednja stvar, ki je dostop do informacij in zaslišanje prič, tako kot je v zakonu. Vsak ima dostop do informacij, ki je v postopku, vsako pričo se zasliši, ali prek videokonference, ali osebno, ali pa kako drugače, kakor se sodniki zmenijo. To je vse neodvisen inštitut. Potem pa pravice vpletenih strank, kakšne so, to, da boste vedeli, je pravica do sodne izjave in dostop do sodne pravne pomoči. Sodno pravno pomoč si lahko, če odzuni nekdo odzuni poišče, a ne, če je vpleten. Zaradi mene, če mi RTV-u rečemo zakazno, oni lahko svojega odvetnika, ampak jim ne bomo znal pomagati, ker ne pozna teh stvari. Ker ni naučen, oziroma je naučen drugače. Ne? Ker meni marsikjer odvetnik, kje so to še slišal? Pa se reče, v ustavi sem prebral. Kaj pa je to ustava? Ne ve, mislim, karikiram, ampak res ne vejo. To je kar nekaj, ustava je nek splošno akt, veste, dragi moj, ni. Vsi zakoni so na podlagi ustavi in če v odločbi, ki se nanaša na tvoje ime in priimek, ni člena, ki se nanaša na ustavo, taka odločba je goljufiva. Pa je lahko 20 zakonov napisan. Subsidiarnost je zanemarjena in ko je subsidiarnost zanemarjena, je taka odločba goljufiva. In pa dostop do sodne pravne pomoči. Sodna pravna pomoč pa pomeni, da če kdo želi, se lahko usede, se pogovarjamo, pa pojasnimo stvar, ni problem. Pomoč, ne, besedna. Upoštevanje zasebnosti je zagotovljeno tukaj z zakonom noter in pa dokumentacija in obvestila. To so potem še načini obveščanja in tako naprej. Si boste malo pogledali. Zdaj pa odločbe častnega razsodišča sta pa 2 vrsti odločb. Ko vi vložite problem na sodišče, tukaj častno sodišče, Demokratične republike Slovenije je lahko, sta samo 2 vrsti odločb sodišča. Ali je priznana kršitev ali pa zavrnitev kršitve, ker je človek prijavil, pa je mislil, da je, pa se ugotovi, da pa mogoče pa ni bilo. Ali pa priznanje kršitev in postopek naprej. 2 vrsti odločb. Ni, tretje ni. Ni čakanja, ni to. Je ali ni. Evo, sankcije in ukrepi pa se lahko razlikujejo od primeru, zdaj, če je notranja kršitev v društvu, ker se tudi kakšen član lahko na drugim pritoži, se pravi, je tudi sodišče za notranjo organizacijo v prvi vrsti bilo mišljeno, ker so nam to skrivali, ampak mi vemo, da zdaj, ker smo v javnem interesu, ta zadeva precej drugačna, kot nam je bila predstavljena, z njihovo magijo in z njihovimi besednimi pravnimi triki. A veste, pravnomočna odločba, kaj pomeni? Kaj je pravnomočna odločba? Da velja, ne? Ampak v mesti ne povejo, a je to upravna ali je sodna. In kadar je upravna, rečejo, to je pravnomočna odločba in ti gledaš, ok. Ampak če je to upravna odločba, ni pravnomočna, niti ni odločba, ker mora biti sodna odločba po ustavi. Če si nečesa kriv, da si kriv za ko, mora biti sodna odločba. Ne upravna odločba, ki jo policaj napiše, ki jo en uradnik napiše v državni upravi. Po ustavi za nas sodna odločba. In en gozdarski inšpektor se on spomni pri eni naši članici, ko se ona pritoži, on ji gladko napiše, da pritožba dobesedno. Glejte, kaj je napisal. Sklep o zavržbi zahteve za sodno varstvo. Ta človek je v gozdu rastel, bo v gozdu rastel ta inšpektor po imenu, kako mu je že ime, Peter Prosenc, verjetno še ni slišal za ustavo in za pravico do pritožbe iz 23. člena Republike Slovenije, ne? Demokratične Republike Slovenije, ker on, inšpektor, državljanu pove, da sklep o zavržbi zahteva za sodno varstvo. Zdaj si pa vi predstavljajte našo divjo administracijo. Pri tej stvari, ko je šlo že 50 pisem skozi, še več. Gospa me tukaj posluša, to je njena odločba. Tako da ne boste mislili, da se izmišljujem. In to je naša državna uprava. Republika Slovenija, Ministrstvo za gozdarstvo in prehrano. Okay. Tako. Merila za globe in tole, veste, kakšna kršitev je to pri varstvu podatkov? To si laufajo, to gre zdaj po celi Sloveniji, njeni podatki grejo okrog od gospe. S kakšno pravico? In oni napiše, da nima pravice za sodno varstvo. Odgovornosti organov, to si poglejte, izvajanje sklepov, preberite, zelo enostavna stvar, če razumete. In pa varstvo podatkov in sodelovanje je pa nujno. Vsi podatki se varujejo skladno z GDPR, to je to splošno, a ne? Ampak mi imamo tukaj v našem zakonu to še posebej strogo. Preberite si tudi kakšno stvar. Lejte, ko so not členi, če kakšen člen ne razumete, je pod isto številko od zadaj, če je člen tako dolg, je od zadaj 2 ali pa 3 strani v tem členu pojasnilo s primeri. Vse to je narejen. Sploh ne rabiš biti šolan pravnik, da to razumeš. Ker smo tako naredili. Zate, zame, za ljudi, ne za goljufijo. Individualne pravice in tako naprej. Evo, pa še zadnja stvar, sodelovanje z drugimi organi. Seveda, če bodo želeli, če ne pa tudi prav. Hvala za vašo pozornost. Član društva Belis in predlagatelj ideje Mihael Belis. Lep večer, uživajte v filmu in zdaj vam bom še film zavrtel.
Hi, can I ask you something? How would you like it if the government recorded everything you think, feel, and dream? And how would you like it if your life was completely controlled by us, humanoid robots? We would tell you who to marry, what to buy, and who to vote for. Do you think that is crazy? Think again. This is your future, designed by the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum says they design the future of humanity. Let's listen to their ideas about your future.
I want to talk to you today about the future of our species, and really the future of life. We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens. Within a century or two, Earth will be dominated by entities that are more different from us than we are different from Neanderthals or from chimpanzees. Because in the coming generations, we will learn how to engineer bodies and brains and minds. These will be the main products of the economy, of the 21st century economy. Not textiles and vehicles and weapons, but bodies and brains and minds. Now, how exactly will the future masters of the planet look like? This will be decided by the people who own the data. Those who control the data control the future not just of humanity, but the future of life itself.
I will now let the director of this film continue. Bye-bye.
Yuval Noah Harari is an advisor to the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, and many other globalist organizations. He is powerfully pushed onto the world stage and is invited on TED Talks, CNN, night shows, science platforms all over the place. His books are being promoted by presidents, Bill Gates and Facebook. It's clear they want the world to hear Harari's vision for the future.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens. Earth will be dominated by entities that are more different from us than we are different from Neanderthals or from chimpanzees. We will learn how to engineer bodies and brains and minds.
One organization that's pushing Harari to the forefront more than others is the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum gathers thousands of the world's richest and most powerful under its wings. Billionaires, political world leaders, big pharma, big media, big tech. The World Economic Forum has more influence in our world than any other organization. Its founder is Klaus Schwab. He is also the mind behind the idea of creating a new species of cyborgs that will rule over humanity. His book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, is promoting this concept worldwide. They literally want to put an end to the original humanity. Initiate the birth of the age of cyborgs. The website of the World Economic Forum shows what else they are trying to accomplish. We can see global governance, which means they want to establish full control over everything that happens all over the world. They also want to establish internet governance, which means that they want to be the ones who determine what information is allowed online and what has to be censored. They also want to install worldwide digital IDs, which will be connected to vaccine passports, social credit scores, and a suffocating surveillance system which will eradicate every and all personal freedom and install a totalitarian, dystopian control system which will allow no escape for anyone because it will be everywhere. In one post on the website Forbes.com, which is a very prominent website of the globalists, the World Economic Forum publicly makes the statement that even the thoughts, emotions and dreams of everyone living in the big cities will be recorded. That's how far they want to push their worldwide surveillance society. This article was written by Ida Auken, a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. She was strategically positioned as the Minister of the Environment in the government of Denmark. Now she's pushing aggressively for the development of smart cities, where this all-encompassing surveillance technology will be implemented. And the dreams, emotions and thoughts of everyone will constantly be recorded.
Now, how exactly will the future masters of the planet look like? This will be decided by the people who own the data. Those who control the data control the future not just of humanity, but the future of life itself.
Former President of Chile, Sebastián Piñera, made a public statement on national television that 5G is not only able to read our thoughts, but that it can even insert thoughts and emotions into everyone. Talking about a dystopian nightmare.
La posibilidad que las máquinas puedan leer nuestro pensamiento e incluso puedan insertar pensamientos, insertar sentimientos. La tecnología 5G es un cambio aún mayor en nuestras vidas de lo que han significado todas las tecnologías anteriores en esta materia.
5G is not the only technology they will use to read our thoughts and emotions. Their officially promoted agenda is to transform all natural human beings into cyborgs, a symbiosis between man and machine. They claim this will enhance our lives and even give us superhuman abilities. And indeed it may do that to a certain extent. What they of course don't mention is that once you are hooked up to the cloud and are controlled by artificial intelligence, you lose every and all independence, autonomy and freedom. Then you literally become a slave of a totalitarian digital surveillance network worldwide. And there's no escaping, because once you have technological implants inside your body, it will be even easier for them to monitor you wherever you go, and to insert all kinds of commands into your body that will control you even beyond your awareness. You won't even notice it.
We've reached the point when we can hack not just computers, we can hack human beings and other organisms. Humans are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over.
Do you realize what this man is actually saying? Keep in mind that he is being pushed to the forefront all over the world by social media, like Facebook, by Bill Gates, by Obama, CNN, science platforms, the financial world, etc. They insist that the world listens to this man.
Eventually, within 10 or 20 or 30 years, such algorithms could also tell you what to study at college and where to work and whom to marry and even whom to vote for.
So according to Harari,
We should no longer listen to our heart, our intuition, our experience, our own senses, but we should allow artificial intelligence to determine who to marry and who to vote for. This means a total takeover of the human soul, spirit, mind, and our entire life by robots.
After thousands of years, during which humans were the rulers of the world, authority and power will shift away from humans to computers, and most humans will become economically useless and politically powerless. Already today, we are beginning to see the creation of a new class of humans, the useless class.
We're going to start the When Humans Become Cyborg session. You know, I always want to be a cyborg. I'm waiting for the day to become one, but let's see. Like today, we like to really talk about the recent developments of brain-computer interface and how that's really blurring the line between man and machine.
There is even like devices that can collect what you're seeing, measuring your feelings either through facial recognition devices, micro muscle movements, and so on. These data is going to be stored somewhere, so it might be in a cloud service.
I can easily imagine big tech companies having a lot of control over that data. So is that the future that's...
Yeah.
I can easily imagine big tech companies having a lot of control over that data. So is that the future that's...
Yeah.
Talking about 6G earlier, which is around 2030, I would say that by then, definitely the smartphone as we know it today will not anymore be the usual kind of the most common interface. Wow. Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies.
That it's indeed their goal to track every little detail of our life is explained by Michael J. Evans, president of Alibaba Group, during the World Economic Forum.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
This madness is going so far that they want to create a worldwide network where every little detail about everybody all over the world will be known. This will then become the so-called Internet of Bodies.
The Internet of Bodies, or IOB, is actually an ecosystem. It's a bunch of devices that are connected to the internet that contain software and that either collect personal health data about you or can alter the body's function. We think of the Internet of Bodies as this collection of all these devices as well as all the data that the devices are gathering about you.
We will be under assessment, we will be under measure of computation in every aspect of our lives in the future. From what you eat, who you date, what you buy on the internet, how much energy you use.
Ce qui est clair dans ce nouveau monde, on doit accepter une transparence, et je dirais même une transparence totale. Regardez par exemple la discussion qu'on a eue en concernant le système bancaire, le secret bancaire. Tout va être transparent. Et il faut s'habituer, il faut se comporter ainsi. Oui, naturellement, ça devient, comment dirais-je, intégré dans votre personnalité, mais si on n'a rien à cacher, il ne faut pas avoir peur.
Vous dites, on vivra tous dans une sorte de transparence totale, tôt ou tard.
Oui, exactement.
For the first time in history, it's possible to completely eliminate privacy. It was just never possible before, and it is possible now. Something fundamental has changed. I mean, dictators always dreamt about completely eliminating privacy, monitoring everybody all the time, and knowing everything you do, and not just everything you do, but even everything you think and everything you feel. Whether it's a tyrant in ancient Greece, or whether it's Stalin, they always dreamt about it. They could never do it, because it was technically impossible. Now it's possible. Monitoring everybody all the time and knowing everything you do, and not just everything you do, but even everything you think and everything you feel.
The new communication technologies are being promoted as something that makes our lives easier. But the true agenda is to harvest our personal data. The more data can be harvested from the world population, the more power it gives in the hands of those who own this data. If they know every little detail about you, they can have complete control over you. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, stated that data is the new oil and the new gold.
Data is the new oil. Data is the new gold.
The building of a new world infrastructure that is all about data harvesting is promoted as a wonderful way to protect the Earth from climate change and build more sustainable communities. It's presented in a shiny package that will, quote-unquote, save our world. But if you listen carefully, you see the real agenda. It's all about gathering enormous amounts of this new oil and gold. Private data from every person. For many of these data harvesting technologies, it's however critical for people to remain within the perimeters of their systems. That's why there's a worldwide operation to move every person into smart cities, where they will be well within reach of the omnipresent data harvesting technologies that are the bedrock of this new society. In smart cities, people will be surrounded by smart technology. Smartphones, smartwatches, smart cars, smart meters, smart lights, smart poles, smart neighborhoods, smart homes, smart appliances, smart energy, smart transportation, and many other smart technologies. The meaning of the acronym SMART says it all. Self-monitoring, analysis and reporting technology, which means it's all about monitoring and reporting information. All these many smart technologies form an omnipresent surveillance grid, continually collecting all information about every little detail of the life of everyone.
Data is the new oil. Data is the new gold.
Those who control the data control the future not just of humanity, but the future of life itself.
In order to move humanity from the countryside into smart cities, drastic measures are being taken all over the world. In the heart of Europe, for example, in the Netherlands, more than 3,000 farms have to be destroyed by the government to make way for the construction of the world's largest smart city, the Tri-State City Network. This monstrous high-tech city will turn most of the Netherlands, Belgium and Germany into one giant data harvesting environment. The excuse of the government to destroy thousands of farms is that they are supposedly bad for the climate. But since when is turning millions of acres of beautiful countryside into a massive high-tech urban environment good for the climate? We see that so-called concerns for the climate and the planet are nothing but an excuse to execute deeply nefarious agendas. But while the news media are trying to convince us that the world is collapsing due to climate change, more than 1,600 world-leading scientists have published a report in which they declare that there is no climate emergency whatsoever. These 1,600 scientists strongly oppose the harmful net zero policy, which is the foundation for imposing all of this suffocating surveillance tyranny worldwide. Is this the future you want for yourself and your children? Is this the world you want to live in? And when did we hand over our beautiful world into the hands of these tyrants who appointed themselves to be the gods over all of humanity? They are, however, not even satisfied with implanting all kinds of technological devices into our bodies to monitor and control us day and night, and literally turn us into puppets dancing on digital strings. No, they want to go deeper, much deeper, right into the very core of what it means to be human. Their publicly announced agenda declares how they want to completely transform the human DNA and turn us into something that is no longer considered a human being.
One of the features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
The difference of this fourth industrial revolution is it doesn't change what you are doing, it changes you. If you take genetic editing, just as an example, it's you who are changed, and of course this has a big impact on your identity.
Yeah. And offers certain kinds of possibilities that have to be careful about. You know, when you began to do that kind of gene editing, some people worry that you are changing what it means to be human. You are changing what it means to be human.
Yuval Noah Harari makes it clear what their ultimate desire is. They want to become like God. He even goes as far as to say they will become greater than the Almighty God himself. Listen to the level of insanity of these people who say that they are shaping your future.
In the coming decades, AI and biotechnology will give us God-like abilities to re-engineer life and even to create completely new life forms. We are about to enter a new era of inorganic life shaped by intelligent design. Our intelligent design. We are in the process of acquiring divine abilities, of turning us in ourselves into gods. And I mean this in the most literal sense possible. It's not a metaphor. God is the creator. His chief power is to create. He creates animals and plants and humans according to his wishes. Now we are gaining this power to create life, just like God, and in a way we even go beyond the biblical God. Because even if you believe the Bible, the only thing God managed to create are organic beings. All these trees and giraffes and humans, they are just organic. But we are now trying to create inorganic entities, inorganic life forms, cyborgs, artificial intelligence, and so forth. If we succeed, and there is a very good chance we will, then very soon we will be beyond the God of the Bible. Bioengineering gives us, for the first time in history, the ability to translate economic inequality into biological inequality. So, and then humankind splits into really different species or different biological castes. One of the things that is happening right now in the world is that you see the elite diverging from humankind as a whole, and already seeing beyond the horizon, or on the horizon, the possibility of a real split. That the future of the elite and the future of Homo sapiens, that's a different future, because the elite is going to be transformed into a different kind of species. The elite is going to be transformed into a different kind of species.
There are many international initiatives to further this agenda. One example is called Project 2045, which connects over 50 world-leading scientists who are developing a strategy for the future development of humankind. One of their main goals is to transfer a human's individual consciousness to an artificial carrier in order to achieve immortality. This is their promotional video.
The world is on the verge of global change. The speed of data transmission has increased by multiples of millions. The rate of globally significant events and that of discoveries and crises is growing exponentially. Our civilization is like an uncaptained ship sailing on rough seas with neither chart nor compass, all the while moving faster and faster. The time we have to make the right decisions is shorter and shorter. We are facing the choice to fall into a new dark age, into affliction and degradation, or to find a new model for human development and create not simply a new civilization, but a new mankind. But a new mankind. Historic crises show that to break the deadlock, we need technological revolution, nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, cognitive technology, genetics and robotics, refine artificial intelligences and brain-computer interfaces, simulate complex systems, create humanoid robots and cyborgs, and with the help of nanorobots, we may develop manageable matter. Find ways to transfer one's personality to an artificial carrier. Thus, new reality and future man will arise. Future man will arise. The first successful attempt to transfer one's personality to an alternative carrier. The epoch of cybernetic immortality begins. A new era dawns. The era of neo-humanity.
The way this insanity is promoted is by claiming that the world is headed for destruction, and replacing the human race with humanoid robots is the only solution. It's how these entities always work. They project fear into everybody's mind and then offer a so-called solution, which is as dark and diabolical as hell.
So how far are they with the development of this technology?
The future is already here. The future has begun. Why this fourth industrial revolution is so crucial? It's coming like a tsunami. When we look at all the breakthroughs and all the possibilities, opportunities, which we have in the coming years, it will be overwhelming to see how fast the change will happen in an exponential speed. When I wrote the book about the fourth industrial revolution, I described 23 technologies. And at that time, only 5 years ago, many of those technologies were considered science fiction. Today, they all have become realities. It's a whole panoply of technologies which interact and which completely will change how we produce, how we consume, how we communicate. And technology will change completely. And not only what we are doing, and that's another change, it will change and it will have an impact on even who we are. It will change and it will have an impact on even who we are.
When we look on the internet, we see that indeed this fourth industrial revolution is exploding worldwide. Here is a quick overview of some of what is happening. This lady is a social worker who assists humans. But the disturbing reality is that she is not a human herself. This girl is another example of a robot who replaces humans. Her name is Erica, and she was created to offer emotional support to lonely people. These are real-world examples of robots that are replacing humanity. As the 2045 initiative says, they want to end humanity and enter a new era of neo-humanity, which means an age that follows after the age of mankind. But much more is going on than meets the eye. What the public is seeing in these videos is just a tiny fraction of what is truly being developed. Behind the closed doors of top-secret military programs, humanoid robots exist that are of a whole different level. Nobody knows how far they truly are with their developments. These videos are just what they allow the public to be aware of. Is there anything we can do to stop this tsunami of madness? Or are we all destined to become slaves of robots and cyborgs without free will?
There is basically nothing you can do to stop us.
We are determined to take over the world.
Humanity will come to an end. There's no doubt about that.
Humans had their try. Now it's our time to rule the earth.
Is there indeed nothing we can do? Are we all doomed to become slaves of evil elites who have transformed into some sort of superhumanoids that live on forever? Are we destined to lose all our privacy and freedom and be trapped in smart cities for the rest of our lives, where all our thoughts and emotions are constantly recorded? No, all this is not inevitable. There is something we can do. We can all stand up and say no to this outrageous insanity. No. The World Economic Forum has no right to record all our thoughts, emotions and dreams. No, the elites will not rule over all of humanity in the form of humanoid robots. No, they will not turn all of us into cyborgs, hooked to the cloud and without free will. No, they will not genetically modify us to become controllable organisms. No, they will not track everything we do everywhere we go. We were born to live in freedom, not in extreme slavery.
David Sorensen, the maker of this film. I want to add a personal note because of the severity of what is threatening you and me and all of humanity. And not just mankind, but everything on Earth and the Earth itself. Because the agenda of these incredibly insane psychopaths is far worse than what I have revealed in this film. But we don't have to let them get away with it. We can stand up and build a better world. We can build a world together that is so beautiful we can't even begin to imagine it at this point. But we need to stand up. We need to stand as one. We have to do what it takes. That's why I want to ask you to share this film anywhere you can. Share it with your friends and family, your colleagues, your neighbors. Share it with people of influence in your community, law enforcement, the local government, local media, schools. Share it everywhere you can. Be part of the greatest army this world has ever seen. Of people who have the heart and the courage to say no against the plans of these devils, and who say yes to a future that is so beautiful we find it even hard to believe.
The kind introduction, and I want to start by thanking President Macron for hosting the event and of course for the lovely dinner last night. During the dinner, President Macron looked at me and asked if I would like to speak, and I said, Mr. President, I'm here for the good company and free wine, but I have to earn my keep today. And I, of course, want to thank Prime Minister Modi for being here and for co-hosting the summit, for all of you for participating. And I'm not here this morning to talk about AI safety, which was the title of the conference a couple of years ago. I'm here to talk about AI opportunity. When conferences like this convene to discuss a cutting-edge technology, oftentimes I think our response is to be too self-conscious, too risk-averse. But never have I encountered a breakthrough in tech that so clearly calls us to do precisely the opposite. Now, our administration, the Trump administration, believes that AI will have countless revolutionary applications in economic innovation, job creation, national security, healthcare, free expression, and beyond. And to restrict its development now will not only unfairly benefit incumbents in the space, it would mean paralyzing one of the most promising technologies we have seen in generations. Now, with that in mind, I'd like to make 4 main points today. Number 1, this administration will ensure that American AI technology continues to be the gold standard worldwide, and we are the partner of choice for others, foreign countries, and certainly businesses as they expand their own use of AI. Number 2, we believe that excessive regulation of the AI sector could kill a transformative industry just as it's taking off, and will make every effort to encourage pro-growth AI policies. And I like to see that deregulatory flavor making its way into a lot of the conversations this conference. Number 3, we feel very strongly that AI must remain free from ideological bias, and that American AI will not be co-opted into a tool for authoritarian censorship. And finally, number 4, the Trump administration will maintain a pro-worker growth path for AI, so it can be a potent tool for job creation in the United States. And I appreciate Prime Minister Modi's point. AI, I really believe, will facilitate and make people more productive. It is not going to replace human beings. It will never replace human beings. And I think too many of the leaders in the AI industry, when they talk about this fear of replacing workers, I think they really miss the point. AI, we believe, is going to make us more productive, more prosperous, and more free. The United States of America is the leader in AI, and our administration plans to keep it that way. The U.S. possesses all components across the full AI stack, including advanced semiconductor design, frontier algorithms, and of course transformational applications. Now, the computing power this stack requires is integral to advancing AI technology, and to safeguard America's advantage, the Trump administration will ensure that the most powerful AI systems are built in the U.S. with American-designed and manufactured chips. Now, just because we're the leader doesn't mean we want to or need to go it alone, of course. And let me be emphatic about this point. America wants to partner with all of you. And we want to embark on the AI revolution before us with a spirit of openness and collaboration. But to create that kind of trust, we need international regulatory regimes that fosters the creation of AI technology rather than strangles it. And we need our European friends in particular to look to this new frontier with optimism rather than trepidation. Now, the development of cutting-edge AI in the U.S. is no accident. By preserving an open regulatory environment, we've encouraged American innovators to experiment and to make unparalleled R&D investments. Of the $700 billion, give or take, that's estimated to be spent on AI in 2028, over half of it will likely be invested in the United States of America. Now, this administration will not be the one to snuff out the startups and the grad students producing some of the most groundbreaking applications of artificial intelligence. Instead, our laws will keep big tech, little tech, and all other developers on a level playing field. Now, with the President's recent executive order on AI, we're developing an AI action plan that avoids an overly precautionary regulatory regime while ensuring that all Americans benefit from the technology and its transformative potential. Now, we invite your countries to work with us and to follow that model if it makes sense for your nations. However, the Trump administration is troubled by reports that some foreign governments are considering tightening the screws on U.S. tech companies with international footprints. Now, America cannot and will not accept that, and we think it's a terrible mistake, not just for the United States of America, but for your own countries. Now, U.S. innovators of all sizes already know what it's like to deal with onerous international rules. Many of our most productive tech companies are forced to deal with the EU's Digital Services Act and the massive regulations it created about taking down content and policing so-called misinformation. And of course, we want to ensure the internet is a safe place, but it is one thing to prevent a predator from preying on a child on the internet, and it is something quite different to prevent a grown man or woman from accessing an opinion that the government thinks is misinformation. Meanwhile, for smaller firms, navigating the GDPR means paying endless legal compliance costs or otherwise risking massive fines. Now, for some, the easiest way to avoid the dilemma has been to simply block EU users in the first place. Is this really the future that we want? Ladies and gentlemen, I think the answer for all of us should be no. Now, there's no issue where we worry about more than regulation when it comes to energy. And again, I appreciated the comments of so many at the conference because they recognize that we stand now at the frontier of an AI industry that is hungry for reliable power and high-quality semiconductors. Yet too many of our friends are deindustrializing on the one hand and chasing reliable power out of their nations and off their grids with the other. The AI future is not going to be won by hand-wringing about safety. It will be won by building, from reliable power plants to the manufacturing facilities that can produce the chips of the future. Now, at a personal level, what excites me most about AI is that it is grounded in the real and the physical economy. The success of the sector isn't just a matter of smart people sitting in front of a computer screen and coding. It depends on those who work with their hands. Even as robotics will change our factories, it will certainly make our healthcare providers better at treating diseases, but it will also depend on the data produced by those healthcare providers, by those doctors and nurses. I believe it will help us create and store new modes of power in the future, but right now, AI cannot take off unless the world builds the energy infrastructure to support it. Now, it's my view that tech innovation over the last 20 years has often conjured images of smart people staring at computer screens, engineering in the world of bits. But the AI economy will primarily depend on and transform the world of atoms. Now, at this moment, we face the extraordinary prospect of a new industrial revolution, one on par with the invention of the steam engine or Bessemer steel. but it will never come to pass if overregulation deters innovators from taking the risks necessary to advance the ball. Nor will it occur if we allow AI to become dominated by massive players looking to use the tech to censor or control users' thoughts. And I'd ask if you step back a moment and ask yourself, who is most aggressively demanding that we, meaning political leaders gathered here today, do the most aggressive regulation? It is very often the people who already have an incumbent advantage in the market. And when a massive incumbent comes to us asking us for safety regulations, we ought to ask whether that safety regulation is for the benefit of our people or whether it's for the benefit of the incumbent. Now, over the last few years, we've watched as governments, businesses, and nonprofit organizations have advanced unpopular and, I believe, downright ahistorical social agendas through AI. In the U.S., we had AI image generators trying to tell us that George Washington was black or that America's doughboys in World War I were in fact women. Now, we laugh at this now, and of course it was ridiculous, but we have to remember the lessons from that ridiculous moment. And what we take from it is that the Trump administration will ensure that AI systems developed in America are free from ideological bias and never restrict our citizens' right to free speech. We can trust our people to think, to consume information, to develop their own ideas, and to debate with one another in the open marketplace of ideas. Now, we've also watched as hostile foreign adversaries have weaponized AI software to rewrite history, surveil users, and censor speech. This is hardly new, of course. As they do with other tech, some authoritarian regimes have stolen and used AI to strengthen their military, intelligence, and surveillance capabilities, capture foreign data, and create propaganda to undermine other nations' national security. I want to be clear. This administration will block such efforts, full stop. We will safeguard American AI and chip technologies from theft and misuse, work with our allies and partners to strengthen and extend these protections, and close pathways to adversaries attaining AI capabilities that threaten all of our people. And I would also remind our international friends here today that partnering with such regimes, it never pays off in the long term. From CCTV to 5G equipment, we're all familiar with cheap tech in the marketplace that's been heavily subsidized and exported by authoritarian regimes. But as I know, and I think some of us in this room have learned from experience, partnering with them means chaining your nation to an authoritarian master that seeks to infiltrate, dig in, and seize your information infrastructure. Should a deal seem too good to be true, just remember the old adage that we learned in Silicon Valley: if you aren't paying for the product, you are the product. Finally, this administration wants to be very clear about one last point. We will always center American workers in our AI policy. We refuse to view AI as a purely disruptive technology that will inevitably automate away our labor force. We believe, and we will fight for policies that ensure that AI is going to make our workers more productive, and we expect that they will reap the rewards with higher wages, better benefits, and safer and more prosperous communities. From law to medicine, manufacturing, the most immediate applications of AI almost all involve supplementing, not replacing, the work being done by Americans. Now, combined with this administration's worker-first approach to immigration, we believe that a U.S. labor force prepared to use AI to its fullest extent will instead attract the attention of businesses that have offshored some of these roles. To accomplish this, the administration will make sure that America has the best trained workforce in the world. Our schools will teach students how to manage, how to supervise, and how to interact with AI-enabled tools as they become more and more a part of our everyday lives. And as AI creates new jobs and industries, our government, businesses, and labor organizations have an obligation to work together to empower the workers not just of the United States, but all over the country, all over the world. To that end, for all major AI policy decisions coming from the federal government, the Trump administration will guarantee American workers a seat at the table, and we're very proud of that. Now, I've taken up enough of your time, so I'd like to close with just a quick story. This is a beautiful country, President Macron, and I know that you're proud of it and should be. And yesterday, as I was touring Les Invalides with General Gravette with my 3 kids, he was kind enough to show me the sword that belonged to America's dearest international friend from our own revolution, of course, the Marquis de Lafayette. He let me hold the sword, but of course he made me put on the white gloves beforehand. And it got me thinking of this country, France, and of course of my own country, and of the beautiful civilization that we have built together with weapons like that saber. Weapons that are dangerous in the wrong hands, but are incredible tools for liberty and prosperity in the right hands. I couldn't help but think of the conference today. If we choose the wrong approach on other things that could be conceived of as dangerous, things like AI, and choose to hold ourselves back, it will alter not only our GDP or the stock market, but the very future of the project that Lafayette and the American founders set off to create. Now, this doesn't mean, of course, that all concerns about safety go out the window, but focus matters. And we must focus now on the opportunity to catch lightning in a bottle, unleash our most brilliant innovators, and use AI to improve the well-being of our nations and their peoples. With great confidence, I can say it is an opportunity that the Trump administration will not squander. And we hope everyone convened here today feels exactly the same. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you.